class. Thanks for coming to the class. This is called A Beginner's Guide to Growing a Vegetable Garden. Most of the people who attend my classes are beginners. And I always ask them at the beginning of the class, what is it that's keeping you from gardening? And most of the people say things like, I really want to garden, but I just don't know how. I have a brown thumb, or I tried to garden once, but whatever, the weeds didn't take over, the pest ate. So after my own failed gardens, I developed this method. Vegetable gardening is really very easy. And I know that we're all busy. So if I have a mission for everyone to be growing part of their own vegetables, one of the things that I know is it has to be easy. It can't take up all of your time. So let's get started and let's go over some of the things that you can do to grow a successful low maintenance garden. When you take a look at plants, it's almost like raising children or having pets. They all require certain things to make them grow healthy. So plants are no different. So we're going to look at some of the things that help you have a healthy, successful garden. And then we'll talk about what you need to do in each of those steps. So here at first, we have our little plant who's down in this nice soil. And a plant can grow successfully if it is in a healthy soil. We all need to be in a healthy environment. So when I teach my classes, I talk first about how to create healthy soil, and we'll look at that because as you see, there's soil right here on the top of the ground, but below there's all of these little critters underground, microscopic, that we can't see. The other thing that plants need is sun. You cannot grow vegetables without having a certain amount of sunlight. Now, some vegetables, which are leafy greens, can tolerate less sunlight, but things like tomatoes and peppers, which have fruit, require at least 6, but better yet, 8 to 10 hours of sunlight a day. So where you locate your garden is important to having a successful, healthy plant. The other thing is plant the right vegetable.
I'm listening to a vegetable garden.
Hey, Mark, can you mute yourself, please?
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. The other thing that we look at, when we are growing a successful garden is to choose the right season that plant grows in. I just went to my local hardware store the other day, and here I am in North Georgia, and it is March the 29th, and they had tomato and pepper plants out. No matter how much I am ready to plant those, they will not survive. All of those summer vegetables need to be planted 2 to 4 weeks about 2 weeks after my last frost. So you just need to know what plant is planted in what season. I often have people ask me, what zone do you garden in? But that's really not important. What is important is, do you know your first and last frost date? Because everything you plant in your garden revolves around those 2 days. So I encourage you, when you leave this class, is you just Google what is the last frost date in Chickamauga, Georgia. And of course, you'll put wherever you live. And then you'll know when you need to do your planting. The other thing is maintaining your garden. If you follow me on Instagram, or you are a member of my newsletter, you'll notice that I have a reoccurring theme, and that is a no-fuss garden. Raising healthy plants requires a few things. It requires water. It requires good soil. It requires sunlight, and it requires that you make its life as easy as you can while it is in the ground. And one of the ways that we do this is we help it fight pests, or we let Mother Nature do the fighting for us. And we also, we don't expect it to compete with weeds. So we're going to look in the next few slides how we complete all of those steps to giving you a healthy plant and garden. Y'all can't see it, but I need to move some things out of my way so I can see. Okay. So how do you create a healthy soil? That's one of the most important things. And we're going to garden organically. And what I mean by gardening organically is we are going to create soil that has a lot of compost in it, has a lot of organic matter, things that your plants require to grow healthily, just like your pets and your children have to have healthy food. I grow in raised beds, and that is one of the things that I really encourage people to do if they don't have the space for a bed, then to grow in containers and grow bags. This way you can avoid tilling the ground, because to grow a healthy soil, you need to be sure that all of those beneficial insects and parasites and fungus underneath the soil that we can't see remain protected. And when you till the ground, you disturb all of that, and a lot of those things die out. It also disturbs all the worms and the beetles and all the things that you want inside your soil. Also, we're going to encourage to use compost throughout the garden season. When I planted my spring garden a few weeks ago, the first thing I did was to replenish the top soil with 2 inches of compost. Also, I added some leaves that I had in some garbage bags that had begun to break down, and I just put those in the soil also. You have to have a location that drains well. Plants will not tolerate being waterlogged. They cannot get the air they need for their roots to grow, or they can't get the nutrition they need. So you want to have a location, and you want to have a soil that drains well. I'm not sure where everyone lives, but in Tennessee and Georgia, where I am right on the Tennessee line, we have lots of clay soil. If I'm going to garden directly in the ground, it will probably take me a couple of years to get the soil where I want it to be. And I'll do that by adding lots of organic matter. And I'll also do that by adding a lot of compost, or that soil will not drain. Also, one of the things that will help your plants where they don't have to fight weeds and compete with weeds for their nutrition is any bare soil in your garden, you're going to cover it with mulch. Or if you're not growing in those garden beds, like if you're not going to grow a fall garden, or unless you are really in a southern region where you can grow all year long, we won't be growing in the winter. So we'll cover that soil with cover crops. It keeps the weeds down. It keeps the soil from evaporating. And in the spring, when you turn it under, it adds lots of good organic matter to the soil. But while you're gardening, the first thing you want to do is when you place that plant into the ground, or into your raised bed or your container, you are going to mulch around it. That will keep the soil moist. It keeps the soil warm in the early spring, and it keeps it cooler in the summer. And it also cuts down on how much you have to water your plants. So one of the things that I do, I have garden clients that I go do a consultation. And then one of the first things we do, and one of the things that I want you to do, is to go into the area you think you want to have your garden. That may mean your backyard, your front yard. It may mean an apartment patio, or it may mean your sunny deck. So I want you to go out into that area 3 to 4 times a day. And I want you to put on a piece of paper where your sun is located. Just mark your paper east, west, north, and south, and then put where the sun is. say at 9 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 6 o'clock. See where the sun is and see if that area is getting 6 to 8 hours of sunlight during that time. You're also going to mark any obstructions. Are there any trees that right now may not be bloomed out, but during the summer that will cause that area to be shaded? Is there a garden shed or the side of your house or a fence along the border that might obstruct the sunlight? So that's the first thing you need to do, is to locate an area that has 6 to 8 hours of sun, and that will be your best location for your garden. And of course, a south facing is the best location. During the summer, the sun is straight overhead and you will get the hours of sunlight you need. If that's not an option for you, your second choice would be west facing location. And yes, it does get the hot afternoon sun, but during the summer, your heat-loving vegetables like tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and squash, those all like the hot weather. You may have to water a little more, but that would be your second choice. The other thing you want to do is place your garden close to a water source. I know that currently I still have to hook together 2 water hoses to water my garden because my spigot is in the front yard and my garden is in my backyard. So it's no fun lugging buckets or watering cans full of water in the hot August sun. So if you have an opportunity, if you have 2 different places you might could put your garden, try to locate it close to a water source. And most importantly, I always encourage everyone to place the house where you will visit your garden often. I step out my back door onto a deck and I am about 50 steps from my garden. So it's easy for me in the morning or the evening to walk out there and just do a walkabout. And when I go out there, I look for things like, does my garden look like it needs to be watering? Does my garden look like that I have some pests on it? Does it look like there's anything going on with my garden? Maybe something's digging in it, or I have some leaves that look like they're yellowing. Maybe I need to fertilize. So these are the things that help you have a successful garden, because you're right there watching and you can quickly see if there's anything going on with your garden. And then I encouraged you to write down your first and last frost date. My last frost date I have on here, and it's April the 15th in my area. So you just Google that. And I want you to write it down, because everything that you are going to be planting in the next few weeks revolves around your last frost date. And then your first frost date, mine is October the 19th through the 31st. And that lets me know if I will have an opportunity to plant again in August and have those plants mature before my first frost hits. So write those down, and then in a minute, I'll go a little bit more about what you can plant before and after your last frost date. So this is why, again, I encourage you not to look at what zone you are in, because even people who are in the same gardening zone have different first and last frost dates. So during the cold season, when the average temperature is below freezing, and there's pretty much a guaranteed chance of a frost, a freeze, or a snow, that's when I let my garden rest. Unless I have a greenhouse or I garden under cold frames, the cold season is the time of rest in my garden. And then we start coming into the cool season. And the way that you know what your cool season is exactly like when you find your first and last frost date. You Google the average temperature for your city. So I Googled the average monthly temperatures for Chickamauga, Georgia, and I wrote those down. So now I know March is my cool season because the average temperature is between 35 and 65, but I can still have a frost, which we have had in the last 2 weeks. So the cool season is between 35 and 65. So after you Google your average temperatures, then what you will do is write all of those down, and then you'll know when it's time to plant your cool season vegetables. And then warm season, this is the time that most people garden. And this is when all of the tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and squash need to be planted. And that's when your average high temperature is between 65 and 85. And there is no chance of frost. That occurs in my area around the 1st of May. Now, certainly we have had some, I think today's around 60, and last week we actually got up to 80 degrees, but that's not a consistent temperature. So I know that even though I go to the nursery and I see those tomatoes and peppers out, I'm not going to be tempted, because if I put those in that cold soil, tomatoes cannot tolerate 50 degrees or lower. So either I'm going to have to create a situation where I'm stressing those tomatoes out, and I'm also going to I'm going to create a situation where this is no longer a no-fuss garden. This is me worrying and going and covering them and taking the cover off, and then seeing by July, those tomatoes still did not produce like they should have. So we're not going to be tempted. We're going to wait to the average temperature. And generally, as a rule of thumb, that's about 2 weeks after your last frost. So for me, I will not be planting any of my warm season vegetables until the 1st of May or even around Mother's Day. So the hot season, this really gets hot quick, and there are some people in some areas where you may have months and months of hot season where the average temperature is above 85. Some of the things that you can grow in the hot season, and for me, that's usually around the end of June, I'll start planting things like maybe okra and sweet potatoes. So for everything, there is a season, and that includes plants. Cool season plants have it in their DNA to grow and flourish between certain temperatures. You can't change their DNA. You can't grow lettuce in Chickamauga, Georgia in July because it will bolt. It's not going to do it. So you're wasting time and money if you try to do that in your area. Warm season plants, we have already looked at that. Cool season plants are all the salad garden plants. These are the leafy vegetables that are not requiring a lot of sunlight to fruit. These are what's in my garden now. I have lettuce, spinach, sugar snap peas, broccoli, cabbage, collard greens, carrots. Those are all cool season plants that can be planted, and you can write these down. You need to plant these around 4 weeks before your last frost. And one of the things, you still have to watch your temperature. We had an unexpected cold snap where the temperatures got down to 28, and that's not a frost, that's a freeze. So I did cover my cool season plants with a frost cloth, and they absolutely did beautifully. And now we've had all this warm temperature and they're really growing. And then warm season plants, again, those are the tomatoes, the peppers, the eggplants, the squash, the cucumbers. All of those things are warm season plants, and then the hot season plants. And again, here we go, just what I said. These are some of the cool season leafy green vegetables, root crops, brassicas, and peas. I see also that there's a couple of people who are coming in late. Just know that you will get the replay to this so you can watch it later. Warm season, and you're going to wait until your last frost date. Then you're also going to watch the weather. And then hot season are things like okra and sweet potatoes. Now, regular, the white potatoes, I have those planted now. Those are cool season, but the hot season are the sweet potatoes. And then you want to create a garden plan. There's nothing worse than going to the nursery and being overwhelmed by all of the things that are there that you want to grow. I'm no different. I do the same thing. I buy, a 6-pack of one thing, and then I really don't have the space to grow it. I have 4 raised garden beds, and then I have one bed that just has strawberries in it. So you can absolutely plan too much. So I want you to, if you're a beginning gardener, I know there may be gardeners in here who are experienced, but I think you would also tell a beginning gardener to just grow what you eat. I very seldom eat eggplant. It may be something I order in a restaurant, but I'm not going to put eggplant in my garden. I also do square foot planting. So when I am planting my summer vegetables, I do not want to take up one whole square foot with one eggplant that will give me maybe 5 fruits. So I choose not to do eggplants. I want you to start small. Choose easy to grow vegetables so that you'll get a quick success. And those easy vegetables in a cool season are the lettuces, the spinach, the sugar snap peas. Carrots can be a little finicky. Kale is easy. Swiss chard is easy. When you start getting to things like broccoli and collard greens and cabbage, they can be a little trickier only because they attract a lot of pests, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So what I want you to do is just pick 3 or 4 from each season and then learn everything you can learn about that. You want to learn how to plant it. You want to learn how to fertilize it, and you want to learn how to harvest it. And then as you increase your knowledge, then start choosing some of the trickier vegetables. And then you want to practice succession planting. You do not want to have all of your lettuce come in at one time. So let's just say I love spinach, which I do. I can either go out in my garden bed and I can plant a whole 6x4 bed of spinach, and then I go out there in 30 days and I don't know what to do with all of that spinach because I don't want to freeze it, but I sure don't want to eat it all at one time. So instead, what I do is I do about 4 squares of spinach, and then 10 days later, I will go and do another square or 2, and then 10 to 14 days later, I do more spinach. You have to know when your hot weather starts because spinach sometimes will bolt during the hot weather. So on a calendar, I put when I plant my spinach. Then I go out 30 to 35 days, and I want to be sure that that last planting matures before I hit that hot June weather. So probably my last planting of spinach will be May the 1st, and I will not plant any more. Okay. You can also do succession planting by choosing vegetables that have different maturing dates. For example, with your tomatoes, you can choose a salad tomato that matures in 65 days. Then you can choose a slicing tomato that matures in 85 days. Then you can find an heirloom tomato that matures in 120 days. So that way you have early access to some little salad tomatoes, and then you will have tomatoes growing all through the season. And generally tomatoes will last up until frost kills them. Mine last year were in the garden up until October. The other thing that you can do to practice succession planting, Let's just take, for example, squash. You can plant a squash plant, and then 10 days later, you can plant a squash seed, and then 10 days later, another squash seed. So that allows you to have squash that comes in all at one time, and you're not having to bug your neighbors and leave squash on their front steps. And you want to maintain your garden. You want to water it when you're supposed to water it. So how much is that? If you read or Google, it's going to tell you that tomatoes need 1.5 inches water a week. Well, what is 1.5 inches? I water my plants, and then since I visit my garden every day, if it's been a very sunny day the day before, I just poke my finger down into the soil, and if it comes out dry, it's time to water. If it doesn't, I'll give it another day. Containers and raised beds do dry out faster, so you do need to check your plants every day. And in the heat of the summer, you very well may be watering your garden every day. But you were smart, you located it close to the house, and you have your water source close. So it's no fuss to go out there and water your garden. But you won't have to water it as much if you did my second principle of the no fuss garden. You mulched around that plant as soon as you planted it. And then when your seeds became large enough, you mulched around those. So now you are conserving water. You're keeping that soil moist longer. So now you have cut down on how much you have to water. When you fertilize your plants, you're just going to use an organic fertilizer. I'll be honest, your plants can't tell the difference between Espoma organic all-purpose vegetable fertilizer or Miracle Grow, but your healthy soils sure can. And all of those things underneath, the soil that are helping to carry the nutrients to your roots of your plants, they know the difference. Miracle Grow is like, I always say, it's like having a donut where you get the rush quickly, but then it's gone. So your plants don't get the benefit of a slow release where they're able to use that fertilizer all over a period of time. Also, sometimes with Miracle Grow, you get a big growth, but you get a big growth of leaves and not so much fruit. You're going to just fertilize according to the back of the bag. But if you have a healthy soil and you've got lots of compost in there, you're going to notice that your plants do not need fertilization as much. When you get to warm season vegetables like tomatoes and cucumbers, yes, you will need to fertilize more often because they take a lot of nutrition out of the soil. When I first plant, mine go directly into the ground where I have put a little bit of worm castings. You can buy those by the bag, and then I just cover them up with the compost. I don't do any fertilizing when I first plant mine. I think your plants are kind of in shock when you first put them into the ground. So you want them to put all of their energy into becoming acclimated to your soil and getting their roots situated. Then maybe in a week or two, I will fertilize. The other thing is pest control. Pests in the garden know a weak plant. You can have a healthy plant, and then you can have a weak plant that maybe you decided you wanted to plant tomatoes in the end of March or the 1st of April, and they're all stressed out. Pests will find that vegetable before they'll go to the healthy ones. One of the things in the no fuss garden method is I do a lot of interplanting of flowers to attract pollinators, and also a lot of flowers to and herbs to attract beneficial insects. For example, let's just talk about the squash vine borer, because that's the one that decimates everybody's garden every year. And the question I get in my garden classes is, how do I keep the squash vine borer off? There's two methods you're going to use when you have a no fuss garden. and you are fighting pests. First, like I said, you're going to let Mother Nature do some of the work for you, but you're also going to help her out. So when I plant my squash, the first thing I do is I plant them. And then I also plant a little flower called Sweet Alyssum, Alyssun, just all around the perimeter of my garden. And Sweet Alyssum is a powerhouse. It attracts parasitic wasps. Those parasitic wasps feed on the larvae of the squash vine borer. What she does, she's a moth. She comes in, she lays her eggs at the base of your squash plant. Those eggs hatch out. The larva bores its way into your stem. You'll go out there one day, you have a beautiful squash plant that's healthy, and 3 days later, it is dying. So you've done that. You've helped Mother Nature by planting some beneficial insects to come help out. But the other thing you're going to do the minute you plant that squash is you're going to cover it with insect netting. I purchased an insect netting off of Amazon that has hoops with it. So the hoops go along my garden. I put one on each end, one in the middle. I throw the insect netting over it, and it comes with clamps to keep it down. And you won't have any squash vine borers. I do the same thing to keep the cabbage moth off of my brassicas. I did that when I planted my broccoli, my collards, and my cabbage. So I think I did good. I think it's 20 till. So I want to open it up. I think Suzanne's going to be monitoring the chat. So I want you to have an opportunity to ask me some garden questions.
And this is Suzanne. I just want to let you know it's okay to unmute yourself and ask a question that way, or you can ask in the chat and I will give Karen the question for you.
Okay, who has questions? I know you do. Don't be shy. Okay, Suzanne, is everyone quiet today?
Everybody says be quiet, but I have a question for you.
Okay.
I want to know, like, right around now, you mentioned the cold season things. Are there like just like 3 or 4 things that you really recommend people start planning now?
Well, first of all, they have to know when their last frost is, because you're just look at your last frost, and then 2 to 4 weeks before that, yes, you can plant spinach, sugar snap peas, all of those brassicas I talked about, the cabbage, the collards, the broccoli, carrots, beets, potatoes, turnips, mustard greens. There's lots of them. You can look those up, but I always call this cool season where I am now. If you're in Florida, you may not even be able to raise any of those. Those you may put in the garden in November. I have a friend who lives in Tampa, and her cool season, the only cool season she has, is like November, December, and January. So if she wanted to grow some of these, she may put hers in the cool season, but she would not be able to plant them in March like I do, because she's already entering her warm season. So it depends on where you live, but cool season vegetables, as a rule of thumb, are 2 to 4 weeks before your last frost. And then your warm season vegetables are about 2 weeks after your last frost. So that's how you decide. You don't have to make it hard. And then no one has asked, but I'll just say one of the questions I always get to is, I don't know whether to plant seeds or plants. I had a garden client that I went to help the other day, and she had all of these packets of tomatoes that she had plans to plant in her garden. And that's not what you need to do. Small things like lettuce seeds, spinach, carrots, all of those things like that, and sugar snap peas or garden peas or snow peas, all of those are planted directly in the garden by seeds. But once you get to plants that take a long time, like my collards and my cabbage and my broccoli, those may take 80 days to mature. So I don't want to put a seed in the ground right now, because I know in 80 days I'm going to be in May or the end of May. So my warm season has started, and all of those plants will probably bolt. And what bolt means is that plant has said, I'm through, I'm finished. You should have eaten me 2 weeks ago, because now I'm turning to seed. My time to produce is over, and now it's my time to reproduce. So they'll start setting out seeds. You'll see, like in your broccoli, we'll send out yellow flowers, and those would be your seeds. So anything that's large like that, you're going to want to buy a transplant.
Karen, we have a bunch of questions that are coming in the chat.
Good.
I want to make sure that you're seeing them. And so the first one that we had was, what other flowers can we plant along with tomatoes? Is marigold all right?
Marigold is, but that's not and I don't see the questions. You just have to tell them to me, Suzanne. Oh,
okay.
There we go. Okay. Marigolds are fine. And marigolds, I did put in with my brassicas, but for tomatoes, what you need to do, tomatoes don't need like pollinators, because they're self-pollinating. The wind blows them. But what I put with my tomatoes, first and foremost, is basil. Even though I'm not a basil fan, I grow it for my tomatoes because it deters tomato hornworms. And then the other thing I put in there is, it's an herb called borage, B-O-R-A-G-E. And it also deters tomato hornworms. Last year in my garden, I had 2 tomato hornworms. And one of those was actually my compost pile. So what you would do, you would you give your large tomatoes about 2 to 2.5 square feet of space. And then in front of those, you plant basil. So what I did last year is I had 3 tomato plants, and then I just had 3 or 4 basil planted in front of them. And then in front of those, I had squash plants. So that's the way that you would put them in your garden.
And we also had an additional kind of follow-up question about other beneficial neighbor plants. So in general, are there a few like general plants that are good for just helping other plants in the garden grow?
Yes, there's also, if you want to attract pollinators so that your squash will get pollinated, I always put zinnias. A pretty yellow plant called calendula, or some people call it calendula, C-A-L-E-N-D-U-L-A, attracts beneficial insects. Dill, plant dill in your garden, that attracts beneficial insects. Cosmos, sunflowers. Of course, everybody does marigolds again. I was trying to think of some more. I interplant these, which means I actually plant these in my garden bed. But around my garden bed, I have some big terracotta pots, and I have oregano and thyme and marjoram, because when they bloom, they attract beneficial insects. So I look more at not deterrence as much as I do attracting beneficial insects to do your dirty work for you. And then, of course, barriers. You would want to put barrier around your squash, but you don't have to worry about your tomatoes. So if you have basil and you have some borage, you can also, like I say, put some cosmos, and that will help protect your tomatoes.
Perfect. So
also, let me just say one more thing. When you're picking flowers, and I plant these by seed, look on the packet and find like what they call miniature ones that get about 12 to 14 inches. You don't want a 6-foot sunflower in your garden bed. Now, if you want to plant those a few feet away, that's perfectly fine. But I do choose flowers that only get 12 to 14 inches high. That way they don't take over my whole garden bed.
That's smart. Okay, so next question. I just want to let everybody know we had a lot of questions. We're going to get to one more, and then at the end of this, we're going to be providing Karen's email address if you have additional questions. And also, we'll be talking about the course, and you'll have a lot of access to Karen through that course. But the next question is, how can I get rid of rabbits and squirrels to my garden beds, even if I've set up a barrier to them?
Well, first of all, I guess what kind of barrier did you set up? And it was squirrels and what?
Rabbits.
The only thing really that's going
Chicken
to
wire.
deter those is to have like a fence around it that they can't dig under. You know, you can put a piece of wire over your garden bed, but once those plants start to grow, unless you're growing something like lettuce, they're still going to be able to get on it. I don't have that problem, but I have seen some people who have made individual cages. For example, if your bed is 6x4, they just built a cage that also had wire on the top of it, and they just set it directly over their garden beds. You can actually buy those online at Amazon, or you can buy those at Gardener's Supply. So other than that, I'll be honest, it's just a real problem. I have clients with deers, and they have just absolutely had to build a fence around their garden. If it's something like little moles or voles, you can actually, when you're building your garden bed, you can put that heavy gauge wire underneath the soil, and they can't dig in. But, you know, people have all kinds of things they say you can do. You can, you know, you can buy some smells that are like wolf urine or dog urine or some of those things. But I really don't know if they work. Okay,
Wonderful.
Let's take one more, Suzanne.
Yeah, let's actually, I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to learn about the course. And if you have more questions, we're going to be giving Karen's email out for people who want to follow up afterward.
Okay, and I have some other resources that you can learn some more too. Okay, well, first of all, I know that an hour is not a long time to give you all this information. It's a lot to be thrown at you, and you have lots of questions. And again, I apologize that we don't have time for me to answer them all. But if you would like to know more, and you like to know how my garden philosophy is, I think you've seen a little of that here in this class, that I'm all for everyone growing their own vegetables, but I know that if it becomes where it's really a chore, that people will give up. So I have taught hundreds of students in the Chattanooga area through classes how to grow a successful garden. I also have one-on-one garden clients locally that we do coaching sessions, and I knew that I needed a way to help more people. So I developed my online course, and it's called the No Fuss Garden Course. When you enroll in the course, you get immediate access to 6 modules that tell you all about how to grow a successful garden. It gives you more in depth of what I talked about today. But what I think makes my garden course unique is it doesn't really stop there. I know that people, if you're like me, I need for people to show me. I need to see what you're doing. So one of the things, the course is now open, but it does close April the 13th. And I shut it down because it's important to me that we all start the class together. And that class is going to start April the 15th. So from April the 15th all the way through November, each month, you will receive a video in your inbox, and it's me in my garden. And I'll be guiding you through what to do that garden season. So if you have questions about how do I amend my soil, we'll be talking about that. We'll start with some warm season vegetables, and you want to know, how do I plan my garden? How many plants can I put in this one space? I'll go over that. Then as the garden season progresses, we'll fertilize our plants together. We'll fight pests together. Then we will do succession planting together. And then we will transition into summer maintenance and into a fall garden. So all through the season, you'll have me. It's kind of like having a personal coach. It's like coming to one of my garden classes each month. But again, it doesn't stop there. You have one-on-one video conference that you can choose whenever you want to do it throughout the garden season, so that you can have a personal coaching session with me for any questions you have. Also, you'll be getting weekly reminders. I'm going to call them reminders, but they're actually like little accountability. I don't want you to purchase this course if you're going to purchase it and not open it up. I just rather you didn't purchase it. I want you to be growing your own vegetables. So each week I'll be your boot camp coach, and I'll be giving you suggestions for what to do and holding you accountable for growing your own vegetables. So Suzanne will have a link, and I want to encourage all to enroll in the No Fuss Garden course. I have lots in store for you there. And for the people who attended this webinar, I do have a bonus. You can't see it on my shirt, but I have created my own garden shirt. It says, let me see if I can stand. I can't. It says, today's forecast, 100% chance of gardening, and it has the sun there. So I want to give you this free, and I also want to give you 5 little herb garden stakes as a gift for me for attending the webinar. And this is like a $40 gift for you attending this webinar and enrolling during the next 24 hours. So this offer will be open all the way through midnight tomorrow night. There's also a payment plan for just 2 payments, if that would help you out. Now, let me tell you a couple of free ways you can get with me. If you want to email me a question, I will be happy to answer one question for you. And then if you will sign up for my newsletter, which goes out about every 10 days, I also have lots of garden tips on there. And you just go to my website, gardenchick.com, click on subscribe. And that's also my blog. And I do a lot of garden tips on there. So again, I appreciate you attending the webinar. I know you're all busy. And if you like more garden help, I encourage you to enroll in the garden course. Thank you all. Thanks very much.
Karen, can you advance your slides so that we can see the information about your course on the screen?
Hold on. I didn't even know it was there. Oh, there's my garden t-shirt. See, these are a graphic artist actually done this for me. So you will not see these on Amazon. And so the No Fuss Garden class is it's a year-long garden season class. We will stop in November, but you will still hear from me until we start back in March. And you will have access immediately to the 6 modules that you can go ahead and look through and be learning some of the fundamentals of gardening. Like I said, you get the one-on-one Zoom call with me anytime during the season. And if you order within the next 24 hours, once you order, I will send you an email. I'll ask for your address, your size, and we'll ship those out to you within the next few days. And so thank you so very much.
I just want to jump in and say that I'm very familiar with the course, and Karen put so much thought into it. It's a wonderful course. Each video is very succinct and clear, and Karen goes out into her garden, actually shows you what she's talking about. So you're not just getting information, but you're also seeing how that's done in an actual garden. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you need to reach Karen, I have put her email into the chat box. And if you need to reach me, my email is suzanne@getabiggerboat.com, also in the chat box. There will be follow-up emails with the links to the recordings. And I hope that you will consider joining Karen's course so that you can have more support getting your garden growing. This year, we want everybody to have wonderful, delicious, fresh vegetables this season.
And Suzanne, there is a QR code, is that correct on here that they can?
Somebody said that it's not working. I tested it and it worked for me.
Okay.
And Christine said, I wish you were in the Los Angeles area, but Karen can work with anybody anywhere by Zoom, and she will take her phone out into her garden, or you can take your phone into your garden so she can actually see your garden growing and give you some advice, correct?
Oh, well, let me say my virtual consults aren't up yet. If she will email me, I will be happy to do a virtual consult. I can send her a link. Right now, my consults are local. I don't have the virtual option if she just wanted to do a consult.
Is
So
anyone
go
ahead, sorry.
Sorry, if you go, if the QR code is not working for everyone, you just go to gardenchick.com, and right there on all the links like Gardenchick shop, there's also I think it says GC Academy or GC course. You just click on that link and it'll take you to the course also.
Thank you so much for everybody. We really appreciate it. We're going to shut the webinar down. There will be a replay. Watch it for it in your emails, and you have access to Karen and myself through email, Karen@gardenchick.com and Suzanne@getabiggerboat.com. Karen, thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for attending, and I look forward to your email, but I must look forward to seeing you in the garden course in April where we can grow together.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all.
And I'm going to end the meeting somehow.